Welcome, everyone. My name is Mehreen Farooq, and I'm a governance technical expert with Counterpart International. And you may feel free to introduce yourself in the chat if you haven't already. On behalf of my colleagues, I'd like to welcome you to our session, Schools Unlikely Civic Spaces for Fostering Social Cohesion and Community Development. Before we begin, of course, I would like to thank Michelle Piercy, Egbe, Josephine, and the amazing team that has been putting together this conference and this session, and really giving us this opportunity to challenge ourselves to find new avenues to promote peace. Now, for those of you who may be unfamiliar with Counterpart, just a brief background and overview. We are a global development not-for-profit organization that is based in the United States with a deep commitment to forging social partnerships among civil society, government, and the private sector to advance local efforts in building inclusive, resilient, and sustainable communities in which people thrive. With decades of work in fragile and conflict-affected countries like Afghanistan, Iraq, Bangladesh, Niger, El Salvador, and many other locations, we've been reflecting recently on how we've been able to really bridge social cleavages and tackle some of the chronic drivers of conflict, particularly those us versus them mentalities and feelings of relative deprivation. Often I have found that the answer lies in fostering safe spaces where diverse stakeholders can apply social integration theory and tackle shared challenges. I dedicated the earlier part of my career to studying how religious and spiritual institutions can play a fundamental role in this regard. But today we're going to focus on something a little different. We're going to be looking at schools. We're going to be drawing from examples of the US Department of Agriculture's McGovern-Dole International Food for Education and Child Nutrition programs in Mauritania, Mozambique, and Senegal, and we'll lead a storytelling session about how schools can be powerful disruptors of the status quo and foster social cohesion in conflict-affected environments. Our session will feature videos from community stakeholders, along with our chiefs of party, allowing us the opportunity to really benefit from their experiences through storytelling. So without further ado, let me pass it on to my colleague, Theresa Becchi, who's the Associate Director of Resilient Food Systems at Counterpart.
Thank you, Mehreen, and thank you everyone for joining us. We're really thrilled to be able to have the opportunity to speak at PeaceCon this year. So as Mehreen said, in addition to our work in strengthening civil society and working in demand and supply side governance, Counterpart has nearly 20 years experience implementing school feeding programs, which aim to reduce hunger, improve literacy, and strengthen local social support systems. Over the course of our years implementing in various contexts, we have observed the common theme that schools provide a unique civic space for communities' youngest citizens and their families to coalesce on issues that touch almost every aspect of the community. It could be health, nutrition, agriculture, or education. School canteens, where we provide snacks or meals, in particular, they offer a tremendous potential to foster social cohesion by bringing together children and families that otherwise might not have any interactions amongst themselves, affording a unique opportunity to reduce stereotypes, prejudices, and promote social solidarity. As such, school meals programs wield powerful potential to serve as a key intervention point to not only directly support the health, nutrition, and education of students, but also foster social cohesion and promote gender engagement and equality, and equity as well, and strengthen local partners and governments in their responsiveness to citizen needs. So today, we are really excited to facilitate a conversation with three of our senior leaders here at Counterpart, who have been with us for some time, with the exception of one who's relatively new. But all three are chief of parties for our USDA-funded, through the Foreign Agriculture Service program, the McGovern-Dole International Food for Education and Child Nutrition programs. Today with us are Desiree Yameogo, who is our chief of party with Counterpart International in Mauritania. And then we also have Casimiro Manuel Sande Antonio, our Chief of Party with Counterpart International in Mozambique, who is our newest member of the Counterpart clan. And then lastly, we have Catherine Lane, who is our Chief of Party with Counterpart International in Senegal. And we are really excited with this storytelling session. We were able to, through our field teams, collect some videos and firsthand accounts from the communities that we work with. And we're going to start in Mauritania, where Counterpart implements two programs, The Future is Ours and Bridging the Future. And the program works in partnership with the government of Mauritania to reduce hunger, improve health, and strengthen the primary education system. Before I turn to Desiree, and we'll ask some questions of Desiree, and he'll give a brief overview of the program, we wanted to share a video from the community of our Mauritanian stakeholders. And this illustrates the power of schools as an unlikely space to foster social cohesion. So we'll start with the video that Mehreen is going to queue up for us.
اسمي مارك فاروق الساداتي مستعمل من قرية البجمل تابعة لبلدية آلام تابعة لمقاطعة آلام في ولاية براكنة والوظيفة رئاسة وآباء التلاميذ. مكتب هذا يعتبر مكتب رئيس مكتب التلاميذ يعتبر نفسه أولا أنه مساهما رئيسيا في هذه العملية، مساهما وحريصا وساهرا على تطبيقها. دور التعليم أهمية عظيمة، لأن الإنسان المتعلم ليس كالإنسان الذي لا يعلم. بالتالي الله عز وجل يقول هل يستوي الذين يعلمون والذين لا يعلمون. مثابة العلم أيضا أنها تزكية للقلب وتوطئة أيضا للنفس واستقامة لها، وبالتالي دور التعليم هو دور الحياة، بالتالي يتعلق بالحياة، لأن الأمم لا يكون لها ازدهار ولا رقي إلا إذا كانت متعلمة. كان الكفالة المدرسية تلبي حاجة التلاميذ معنوية وحسية، وبالتالي أثبتت الدراسات أن الذي يجوع لا يستطيع أن يحصل العلم، وبالتالي هي كانت فيها تغذية، والإنسان إذا كان يتعاطى شيء من التغذية أحرى إذا كانت التغذية أيضا تغذية مواكبة للعصر، يكون أداؤه على قدرة استيعابه لهذه المواد تكون أوسع إن شاء الله تعالى. بالتالي ما دام هو ليس جائعا وليس عطشانا فإنه يكون متلقيا للعلم ويكون أيضا منتبها له، وسيكون أيضا حاصلا عليه إن شاء الله تعالى إذا توفرت الجهود لذلك. المدرسة يعتبرها أيضا أنها إذا عددت أمة طيبة العراق كما قال الشاعر. بالتالي المدرسة تعتبر أيضا هي النواة الكبرى كالمسجد عندنا كإسلاميين مثلا لحل النزاعات الأسرية والاجتماعية أيضا وللتغلبات على المشاكل الحياة. وبالتالي المدرسة أهميتها عظيمة بالنسبة لنا، ونعتبر أيضا أننا لابد أن يستعد كل واحد منا لأن يواكب الأبناء حتى يدخلونها ويتخرجون منها حتى يصلوا إلى مرحلة ما هي فوقها. بالتالي تعتبر كأنها من الأمكنة التي هي محل لحل وفض النزاعات الأسرية والاجتماعية. أعتبر أن اختلاف الثقافات واختلاف الأعراق مثلا أنه عامل قوة، نحن نتخذه عامل قوة لأنه تتكامل به وحدتنا، وبالتالي يكون ثراءه عظيم، لأن إذا كانت ثقافة من هذا تختلف مع ثقافة هذا وكانوا أيضا لهم إرشاد معنويا وحسيا يكون أداؤهم قوي. وبالتالي نحن اختلافنا في هذه القرية اختلاف أنواعنا وأعراقنا وحتى ثقافتنا نعتبره أنه عامل قوة لنا لا عامل ضعف لنا. هذه المنظمة ساهمت بشكل كبير إن لم تكن أيضا هي المسألة الأولى عندنا، لأنها ساهمت في دعمنا حسيا ومعنويا. أولا أطرتنا وكان هناك تكوين مستمر لآباء التلاميذ حتى استوعبوا العملية التي من خلالها يحافظون على ترقية الكفالة المدرسية، وبالتالي لهم إسهامات معنوية ولهم إسهامات حسية ولهم تكوينات عدة، ونعتبر أيضا أنهم أناروا لنا الطريق، وبالتالي كانت لهم تلك العظمى علينا حقيقة في هذه لأنها كان خير شريك لنا.
Thank you, Mehreen. So Desiree, I have two questions that I'm going to kick you off with, and then we'll hear more about your programming through them. If you could please describe to us the socio-political challenges that Mauritania is currently facing. For example, migration, climate change, we know those are all factors happening in the Sahel region that are challenges that are also applicable to Mauritania. How has this program fostered social cohesion amidst all of those challenges?
Thank you so much, Theresa, for the question. And I'm really happy to take the floor to give you some perspective of the governmental program. Thank you, and my regard to all the participants. First of all, it has you know, Mauritania is a bilingual country. So in Mauritania, officially we have French and English as an official language. The country is huge, more than 1 million square kilometers. In terms of comparison, we can compare Mauritania to New Mexico, or a country like Burkina Faso, where I am from. It is 4 times Burkina. So you can see how large is Mauritania. The population of Mauritania is around 4.5 million inhabitants. And in Mauritania, we have 3 main ethnic groups. You have the white Moor, you have the black Moor, and you have the Negro Africans. In Mauritania, in the good side, is a growing democracy. We held regular elections since 2009. The last election was in June 2024. The country is facing a lot of challenges, as you mentioned. First, is a desert country. 99% of Mauritania is in desert. Only 1% is in Arab country. So it gives you in terms of climate change, how the country is coping. The country is also facing a lot of migration issues like other African countries. Mauritania is at a certain point to Europe or Africa because of the sea. Just according to the Department of State, in 2023, 15,000 Mauritania migrated illegally to US. So it gives you a sense how people are moving from Mauritania to elsewhere to survive. Insecurity, even though Mauritania seemed to be a relatively peaceful country because we didn't face any issues since 2010. But in Mauritania, as you know, Mauritania is bordering to Mali, and you know how it's going to Mali right now with the jihadist attack. So the border to Mali, Mauritania is facing a lot of refugees coming. Last year, we had more than 200,000 people who are refugees coming from Mali. There is also a lot of gap, you know, in terms of education. In Mauritania, you have only 40% of the population who is literate. Another challenge is the governance. The governance is, I would say, relatively weak because the economic growth is not benefiting to everyone. So there is a lot of issues in terms of governance. Another important issue relating to our topic here is the social cohesion. As I mentioned, with 3 ethnic groups, we're not really living, interacting together in a very good science way. I would say Mauritania is, you know, is facing the question of the nation here. And some report, even a case study reported that there is continuous serious issues, you know. Some report even mentioned that in Mauritania, we are facing slavery practices and between the white Moor and the black Moor. And this is a serious problem. To reverse the situation, Counterpart is implementing, as you mentioned, a governmental program. In that sense, we are really working closely with the government. As the video mentioned, school is viewed in Mauritania as a nation. So with the government, we have a strong collaboration, we have a strong engagement in order to implement this program. We are working in the 3 vulnerable regions of the country, namely the Brakna, the Gorgol, and the Tagan region. The relationship with the government is a unique, is a very exemplary, and the 3 main regions that explain why we have such wonderful relationship with the government. First, the program that we are implementing is in line with the government priority. The government has what we call the 10-year education program, and school feeding has a priority role within this program. The second reason, the program that we are implementing was design, implement, and even monitor with the strong presence and involvement of the government. So whatever the government make a strong proposal, we heard that and try to respond positively. The program is, as you mentioned, is mainly focused on nutrition. And this is really important to the government of the Mauritania, especially from the President of the Republic, because he see education has a starting point, as the President really say, has a nation who can make to change the nation, to solve all the problems that I mentioned, especially regarding to equity, to injustice, because starting with the education, we can really help to solve this problem. So the focus on our program is the school feeding, but also school supply and uniform, because we are thinking that having all these issues together can really help to boost the education. And our primary beneficiary of the education are mainly the school children. For instance, in fiscal year 24, we have provided more than 60 million meal to more than 74,000 students. So it gives you the power. So in addition to the government, we are also working with local NGO. And also at the school level, we are working with the parent-teacher association, but also with the school management committee. But also with the parents, because, you know, especially women. We are working with the women because the women are the primary actor and the key contributor of our program. We actively involve them in the program management, in decision-making. Women participation helps us to ensure that families address and enhance the program effectiveness. In addition, women often take a wonderful leadership role, especially when it comes at the PTA level. Women really participate. When it comes to support the school feeding, we have the cooks who really help in the preparation and the serving of the meal. So we actively work with the women. We also work with the youth. As I mentioned, the 60% of the population in Mauritania is mainly youth. So we work mainly with the youth because they are the future of the tomorrow. So their engagement is critical in ensuring long-term sustainability. We involve youth people in various capacities, from participation to the school management committee to community initiative. We involve them when it comes, for instance, to repair a school or to fix a latrine. So we involve the young people. Their involvement helps to building a sense of responsibility and foster a culture of collaboration and innovation. Programs that address youth needs also contribute to their development and empowerment, which is essential to social cohesion and resilience. So that's maybe, I think, I respond to the question. I want to end with a kind of lesson learned. Involving the government of Mauritania from the very early stage, developing their capacities and maintaining openness, transparency, respectability, solidarity, lay the groundwork for their engagement and sustainability. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Desiree. And your points about the government involvement have really demonstrated how we've been able to tap into a really collaborative spirit of working alongside the government. And we're seeing success in transitioning programs, schools that were funded by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. We're transitioning them for full ownership to the government, which is a really great sign of success for sustainability and long-term investment from the Mauritanian government. And they've been amazing collaborative partners. And thank you for speaking more about the role of women and youth in the parent-teacher associations, the PTAs, working as cooks and volunteers with the school canteen. That really does represent how these programs integrate usually historically underrepresented populations. And we're going to be able to hear more of that from our next speaker from Mozambique, Casimiro, who is going to be able to give us some more examples of that really local grassroots effort of getting community members to be integrated and involved in these programs. So thank you so much, Desiree. And we're going to now turn to Casimiro, who again is our chief of party of our school feeding program, Our Bright Future, which focuses on school feeding, supporting school gardens and community farms, and strengthening, again, the quality of education in 4 departments in Mozambique. So we're going to start with the community lens, and the next video will demonstrate that with some interviews of community members who are supporting our program in Mozambique. So Mehreen, I'll let you cue up the video.
I'll share one of my papai. Abitola mina bila na chance bin so. Rekonda na shikora itelo kela awas ko wa. Ina abo sheti vai na ikapsa jat. So we anda we na ko God. That chance of say a police na shikona you. Ishaka na these people avan. Anda we ya shikara ka ba na ba which nchana ko shikala bana vai. La scuola ha il suo rinculo, sangue secondo i stati lo sai sekela avana vai na. Itani mabari un paulo kama siku ya kutana scuola ya kombi sana itela masekele. Itelo la tsoka la scuola. Amba.
Thank you, Mehreen. So we were just able to hear from 2 community members, Isabel and Anastasia. Isabel, who is a vice president of the local school council, and Anastasia, who is a volunteer cook.
Let me send
Cooks every day for the children. Casimiro, with these great examples of local community involvement, can you please share more on how women have been engaged in the school feeding and canteen management efforts, and how have they become emerging leaders in their community to support school administration, leading in food preparation, management of commodities, cooking and serving the children, and providing a powerful connection to the youth to better understand their needs? Can you please describe for us how these programs offer women a unique entry point of civic engagement and community development? For example, their roles on the parent-teacher associations or school councils in Mozambique. And yes, so that's a bit of a big question, but we would love to hear more from that very grassroots local perspective of how do we engage and get the community involved in these feeding programs.
Great, thank you, Theresa, for these introductions, and my greetings to all the participants here. And this project is being implemented. The stories that the ladies just counted, they are discussing the transformation that this program is creating in our community here in Maputo province. This project is in fact helping to address several challenges that this country is facing. As you know, Mozambique is in southern region, located in Southern Africa regions, is rich in natural resources, but there are a series of factors that are lagging the country behind in terms of development. For instance, the literacy indicators are very down. There are issues of the children drop out of schools. We have some cases of early child marriage. And then given these scenarios and the role that education plays in countries, then these programs, Our Bright Future, can be really to help transform the communities, transform society. How we are doing that? This project is a consortium of 4 partners that are implementing several components of the project that includes school feeding, literacy, that includes also agriculture, nutrition, and the health components. And to be there, we have been able to understand the real need of community. We went through the assessing community needs, and then together with communities, we engaged them in several discussions to really point out how to better manage the schools. Given the role of the school in the community, we have been able to help them to organize the communities through community councils, where different parts of the society participate in school management. And through these structures, we also engage in working closely with the governments to help put in place policies that will help really advance the education of children, given the role this education will give. So the mobilization part of communities, women particularly, was very critical since the beginning of the project. And then this is creating space for community first to identify the challenge they face, including at their household level at school, and engage them in direct collaboration with the school to be able to improve the school management. One of the critical elements that the project brought is this, the food. The food is demanding that people have gathered together in a dialogue in terms of how could they best support the school. As you know, the investment to school is still limited. The mobilization of community and participation in dialogue helped them even to voluntarily contribute with wood for the cooking. Sometimes they might bring salt in the cooking, but this is based on all this discussion, inclusion that we are creating with the community in the process. Then the continuous dialogue, integration of different households is really critical. As part of school feeding, we also engage in other civil society organizations or local producers who can bring fresh food fresh vegetables that will be used to really help with the cooking. And then this is a demonstration of how the cooking is helping. Apart from cooking as such, we are creating this space of dialogue between women. As you know, when women gather, we'll discuss other elements that are affecting them in the society and bring up some solution to the problem. And then this is the steps that the project is creating to further integrate women's and like a local community member to help address or support the school in the process. There is a component of bilingual education. We are producing different material to reinforce that indicator that I said that is very below, which is the literacy rate, which is down. Through this other component of project, we are really helping to create this atmosphere where everyone can contribute, everyone could create a sense of purpose within the community member. So, of course, as a next step or a way forward, we'll still continue collaborating together to create framework like policies to make sure that this kind of engagement will continue. Like we are missing in the country a strategy for school feeding, a law for school feeding. Through this project, the advocacy that we are doing, we want to ensure that this is also critical for the sustainability of different interventions that the project is implementing. So I will close this initial talk with looking forward that we'll need to include the different sectors of communities. We need to include the government, local authority to make sure that they really continue engaging in this process, in this school feeding program, because we know that with the empty belly, nobody could learn, and this is really critical. And through also this program, we are being able to reduce the dropout of children from school. It is really creating great transformation that's really critical for the children development.
That's great, Casimiro. Thank you so much. And I think one thing that really stands out is, you said sense of purpose, providing individuals in the community a sense of purpose. And that is something across the board, which is so important for community mobilization and how to galvanize a community around a common interest, a common effort. And that does then translate and go up the flagpole to advocacy and impacting and influencing national agendas and national policies. And it does start at that grassroots level. So thank you so much. And another thing that also stands out is the engagement of the community through their contributions of community farming and the local and regional procurement of commodities to ensure that we are utilizing commodities that come from either down the street or close by from the closest market, or perhaps regionally, depending on the area. This is so important because it ensures we are using commodities that are culturally appropriate, that the kids enjoy eating, and it's yummy for them to eat. And also it demonstrates to the community that they have the means and availability usually, or we can support them in how to find that by strengthening their procurement abilities and capacity, and integrating the locally sourced commodities with the commodities that are donated by the US government. But that's a really great example, and all of our programs do utilize local and regionally procured commodities. I think in Mozambique, the farming, community farms and school gardens have taken off quite well. And again, per context of each country, it depends. It depends on the variability and how ready a community is to do. I mean that in terms of their ability to do farming. And you gave some great examples, and our speakers, Anastasia and Isabel, were so appreciative that they could share their thoughts in the video. So moving forward, we are going to hear from Senegal. Senegal is one of our programs where we recently had programming in the north of the country in Saint Louis, and now we have programming in the south in the Casamance. So two very different environments. We implemented Sukabe Django 1 in Saint Louis, and now we are implementing Sukabe Django 2 in the south of the country in the Casamance. And we are going to start first with the community lens, a video from the field team, and then we will hear from our speaker, Catherine Lane. So Mehreen, I'll turn it to you for the next video.
Lamine Sagna, président du CGE de l'école élémentaire franco-arabe de la commune de Sédhiou. Alors le rôle du comité de gestion, c'est encore d'œuvrer la disponibilité et la haute responsabilité pour le développement de l'école, pour que les enfants restent dans la fierté, dans la confiance, dans la paix, dans la concorde et dans l'unité au sein de l'école. L'école prend en charge les enfants à l'absence de la communauté et il y a une confiance qui se tisse entre la communauté et l'école. Les foyers ne sont pas les mêmes. Il y a des enfants, par exemple, avec la distance, les mamans ne peuvent pas préparer le petit déjeuner le matin. Ou bien, il y a d'autres communautés pour trouver la substance précieuse pour prendre ça le matin, c'est un problème. Mais si Counterpart est là pour encore aménager et prendre en charge tous ces problèmes, l'enfant reste à l'école. L'enfant est paisible à l'école. Et l'enfant, il est au comble de gaieté quand il partage quelque chose avec ses camarades. Et à partir de l'école, les enfants peuvent même se connaître de localités, là où ils habitent, dans quel quartier. J'habite Jirkunda, j'habite Morikunda, j'habite Kebombe, etc., ou Santassou. Mais ces relations aussi vont tisser une autre relation à l'endroit de leur famille. Donc, il y a une symbiose entre les enfants, leur famille et leurs parents. Quand deux communautés sont en conflit, on voit tous les enfants de ces deux communautés s'asseoir ensemble, boire ensemble, jouer ensemble, manger ensemble, faire tout ensemble. Mais c'est un cri d'appel et une prise de conscience pour leurs parents. Mais nous sommes en conflit et nos enfants sont ensemble. À quoi sert de prolonger ce conflit? Et comme le directeur aussi, c'est un maillon incontournable avec le président du CGE, ils vont saisir de cette occasion pour consolider la paix ou ramener la paix entre les communautés. Quelquefois qu'on règle les conflits entre les communautés. Donc, tu ne peux pas dire que non, celui-là, il est irrité, ce n'est pas mon problème, je m'en vais. Non. Il faut s'impliquer parce que c'est un élément de la communauté. Et dans la communauté, nous voulons l'unité et la paix pour consolider quelque chose. Donc, dans ce leadership aussi, ce n'est pas seulement l'école, mais autre chose va s'ajouter à cette responsabilité de l'école en tant que président de CG.
Thank you. I really love that video. I think not to oversimplify, but getting to the point of really sharing a meal together can regulate conflict, and that is it's very spot on. And I'm excited to turn to the chief of party from Senegal, Catherine Lane. And Catherine, we know from Senegal that the programs have in our programming in Senegal, we've had great success with what we've called sustainability action plans. And we'd love to hear more if you can share what these are exactly and what do they do to support communities having a lasting role in partnership with their community, with their peers, and with their government as it relates to school feeding. And how does this support long-term sustainability and integration of school feeding into their community? So, and please feel free also to elaborate more on the program. So thanks so much for being with us, and we'll turn to you.
All right, thank you, Theresa. I'm happy to be here. I thought I would be speaking to people who really had no knowledge about school feeding. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about what I think is one of the main things that comes out of the video, and then I'll talk about sustainability action plans. At first thought, you wouldn't put together peace building or social cohesion and school feeding. It's not like spaghetti and meatballs or bread and butter. You wouldn't automatically put them together. But in a context like Senegal, or like we saw in Mozambique or in Mauritania, the two together can be a really powerful tool. When you think school canteen, don't think a long cafeteria counter with students pushing their little trays past shiny silver containers full of food with that little cart of milk at the end. Don't think about, it's not private sector vendors who are managing school feeding for a profit. This is what you should actually think of when you do school feeding. There we go. So these are women in rural communities. Their children probably go to the school. The one on the left is a school called Mampantine 1. And just like we heard in the video from Mozambique, she works with other women who volunteer in rotating groups to prepare food. It's lunch twice a week and breakfast 3 times a week. They might be eating millet and peanut sauce. They might be eating rice and lentils. They might be eating cornmeal and split green peas. Schools can have anywhere from 90 to 400 children, 400 students. So it's a big chore to prepare these meals. Let me just say, like we heard in Mozambique, women are the key to the success of school feeding. They're also key in a child's academic success. They're key in a child in family health. And in rural areas, they are the backbone of agricultural production. So this is how the food is served. So you've got the giant marmite. They usually have one for the rice or the starch, and then they have one for the legume, although in some recipes you wind up mixing them. But they cook it, and then they put them in bowls, large bowls, and they carry them back to their respective classrooms. So in Senegal, there aren't enough classrooms, there aren't enough teachers, much less a cafeteria. School canteens operate thanks to the participation of parents, students, teachers, the school director, the school management committee, like Mr. Sanya said in the video, local authorities, and the Ministry of Education. However, unfortunately, there's no mandate for school canteens in Senegal. There's less than 20% of public elementary schools that actually have a canteen. So where they work, everybody has a specific role. A lot of it's voluntary. And if those students are going to eat every day, 5 days a week, 9 months out of the school year, all these stakeholders have to work together. So anyway, maybe you can see where that would go towards social cohesion and peace building. People collaborate. They spend time together without being obligated. People that are involved in the canteen, they build relationships. They solve problems informally. You get the women together cooking, you get farmers out in the field. You'll see later on, you get community-wide meetings. So you get people together and they feel connected through this common goal. And then they share the benefits of a successful school canteen. Basically, all this helps build social capital. In the next slide, you'll see actually how the kids eat. So take a look at this picture. This is how meals are consumed. There's a large bowl. There's usually 4 to 6 kids around the bowl. There is a whole etiquette of eating out of a bowl. You have to eat with your right hand. You can't eat from the space that's next to you. You can't eat more than your fair share. You can't pick around food and discard what you don't like. It's very complex, and it's a set of rules that kids learn at home, and then they use them when they're at school. But as you can see, these kids are sitting side by side. Eating at the canteen. It's an intimate experience. This is not like when kids are in classes where it's very regimented and there's much less student to student interaction, unfortunately. So anyway, kids, when they're eating lunch together, they become friends. They learn about each other. They learn about other, whatever that label is, and that other doesn't have negative connotations. It's really a mixture of socio-economic and cultural aspects starting at a young age, which is crucial. This helps build those connections that can have a plethora of benefits, of positive impacts, both immediately and later on, both in terms of an individual student, but also the school and the community at large. It's been shown, evidence has shown that when children, in schools that have canteens, children actually come to school more often. So they're actually getting more class time exposure. They learn more, and our project is focused on literacy acquisition. So that's something we measure, but it's shown that they succeed better in learning to read or being able to read to learn in the later grades. So in terms of social cohesion, they spend more time together, and this builds connections. There's actually been, I think, as it was said in the video, there's been multiple situations where different communities in conflict, either over land, there's been insults, perceived insults between leaders, or in one case, there was arguing over where to place the school. The canteen was kind of a carrot that brought people together to find a solution rapidly, because they didn't want to miss out on the opportunity of having a canteen, or they already had a canteen, but if they can't work together, then the project can't work there. We actually are working in 285 schools that were selected at the beginning of this 5-year project. So that's a lot of schools. It's a lot of people. It's I think over 70,000 kids this year that we will that will eat at the school canteen. So I just a little story in Saint Louis. We had this situation where 2 villages were feuding over a piece of land. If I remember correctly, it was by usage. It was near water, and one village was claiming it and the other village was claiming it, and they were in conflict. But there was only one elementary school, and all the kids from that village plus some other ones went to that school. And when the school director called the parents together for a meeting on the canteen, this was one of the first time where, okay, fine, one village could sit on one side and the other village could sit on the other, but they actually had to talk and interact, and they had to make decisions on what to do about the canteen. Eventually, and it was not just the school director, there was the imam, local religious leaders, and then there was also municipal leaders. They worked with them, they resolved the conflict, and then afterward, later on, there's a construction component of the project, and they wound up building a new schoolroom for the school. So anyway, it was a direct link between the project, school feeding, and conflict resolution. I'm gonna go to the next slide. So there is agriculture is often linked to school canteens because there's community contributions. You can see in the bottom left-hand corner, people are working in a rice field, and that rice is used in the canteens. If the harvest is really, really good, it might be some of the rice goes to the canteen and the rest of the rice gets sold, and then they use that to they use that money to help run the canteen. So Theresa asked about how we do things in a sustainable manner. So basically our approach, Counterpart's approach, looks at school feeding in the short term, so that every day the canteen happens, but it also works with stakeholders to put in place a sustainable system for the long term that will outlast the project, which is 5 years. We work in partnership with government actors at all levels, municipality, regional, and national, because in the end, they're the ones that will manage a national school feeding program, and not the project. The project will finish, and these are the folks that have to know how and be motivated and have the tools in place to run a national school feeding. So when we're looking at a successful school feeding, one of the main tools we used is called a sustainability action plan. in short, SAP. Not very nice sounding acronym, but anyway, it's an approach that includes multiple community meetings where together they identify and they agree on the goals of the canteen, and then they execute their action plan, and then they monitor progress. And basically, the key is that stakeholders will take over managing, evaluating, and improving the school canteen. So the school management committee, the school director, the cooks, who are all always women, and other parents, farmers, and contributors. They're the ones that have to run the canteen at the local level. Of course, they need the support of regional authorities, and then they need the support of the ministry, because the money for school feeding comes from the ministry. The Sustainability Action Plan is really a simple document which school management committees use to guide its actions over the school year concerning the canteen. So I think what we heard in the project in Mozambique, that school meal programs give community a sense of accomplishment. And as we said in our video, they give actors a sense of pride. So just finishing, I think that when we look at school canteens as a means to build social capital, that can be very key in both preventing conflict and resolving conflict. Better school outcomes help children develop, help families develop, help communities develop, help our country develop. And it all starts by bringing together children who share a meal, increase their understanding, and go forward into a future with some much better perspectives on what they can do. So the impacts are generational. Okay, that's it. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Catherine. Really great to hear about the core of these programs of building relationships to solve problems, to build their social capital. I think it's a great example you gave of that conflict resolution and how the canteen brought those two villages together. I am going to and you also touched upon women again being backbone of a community in terms of being the farmers or supporting as volunteers. That's really interesting for us to hear, and it echoes what Casimiro was sharing in Mozambique. So really, I think across the three programs, hearing about this sense of purpose, establishing trust within communities, and a sense of accountability too for the school leaders, the local and regional leaders, and nationally, the government who are involved. I am going to move us into a broader discussion now about the lessons learned. And we are going to open the floor for questions. So you can use the chat to provide a question in the chat, or I believe you can raise your hand, and you should be able to unmute yourself and share a question. But I'll kick us off with one or two questions for our speakers, and then we'll move into audience questions. But I think from each of you briefly, maybe 1 minute for a quick response each. First, as we're reflecting on how schools and other key service delivery endpoints enable community mobilization and they foster social cohesion, and can build resilience against shocks, I'd be interested to hear what are some of the concrete lessons learned and recommendations you would provide. Are there resources that need to be that are needed to replicate the models you've taken? For example, Catherine, you gave the concrete model of the sustainability action plans. What resources are needed to replicate those? So I'd be interested just to hear first. Let's start. I'm going to go backwards, Catherine. I'll start with you. If you can give a just quick 1 minute response of what your lessons learned and recommendations you'd provide for replicating some of the successes you found in the program.
When we talk about school feeding and school meals, I think the part of the key challenge is sustainable funding. So we put in place a system at the local level, regional level, and then you have support for then you have to have support at the national level. And so nobody's against school feeding. Everybody loves school feeding. The challenge is to find funds for it and then make sure that there's accountability for performance, that the canteens run well, the kids eat, and there's always an evaluation to keep things moving forward. So replicating that, a sustainability action plan is actually not very expensive. It's approach. You have community meetings. There's lots of discussions. The tool itself is very inexpensive and very simple to use. Actually getting funding for operating the school canteen, that's the big challenge. I think on a broader level, looking at programs that are not focused on school feeding, you know, when I remember when I was with USAID and I was managing a peacebuilding portfolio, and I tried to get things like a water project, or I tried to get things like an economic growth project linked to peacebuilding in a conflict zone. But it was really hard to do. People wanted to either focus on outcomes for water or health or school feeding, and they didn't want to focus on the actual peace building part. So a lesson learned is you can take a canteen project and you can layer it. You can use a peace building project and integrate them and get 2 outcomes for the price of 1 on a certain level. So that would be my thoughts.
That's a great thought. I'm going to come back to that later because it's a really great point about the layering. Casimiro, how about you? Are there specific lessons learned and recommendations that you've experienced and that you would encourage others to think about from your experience in Mozambique?
Yes, definitely. You know, currently we have around 245 schools supported with school feeding in one province. And then what we learned is that the community engagement, having women in place, school teachers engagement, local authority engagement, that's critical. And then apart from that, we look a little bit around the community. We see other market actors, those that produce the local produce that support school feeding. What we learned is that if we can really support the big farms for them to continue producing, even having some portion of the selling for themselves and other to feed the school, this is one good way of ensuring sustainability going forward. Another component is what we see is that the country have discovered a large portion of oil and gas that will bring a lot of revenue in country. If we have a policy in place, like a full school feeding strategy and law that will at least allocate funding to even if it's like 1% of the resource to the school feeding, that will really be a very valuable element in school feeding. This links very closely on what Kathy was saying. Sometimes for this program, we don't need that much funds. But if you start with the small funds, then you can create really big transformations because those communities need, particularly given that for Mozambique, where we have around 62% of people living below the poverty line. If we can bring this kind of support, we really bring transformation for the community because kids will be there at school, children will learn. So we create really a bright future, as our project says. Yes.
Thank you, Casimiro. I think you bring up the big question around private sector engagement and how do we go beyond not just government engagement and government leadership and community engagement and community leadership, but knowing that there's many ways to go about this and finance it. And depending on the country and the private sector environment in that respective country, there's potential opportunity. I recently was in Angola and their largest school feeding operation is done through the corporate social responsibility of a private sector entity. And it was really fantastic to see how they were working in partnership with the government. So funding, of course, that's everybody's challenge, but you make a great point of how if we start to integrate it and create the expectations within law and bring in those other stakeholders beyond beyond NGOs like Counterpart and our local partners who we work with and who are diligently on the ground doing the hard work, and the governments themselves. Sometimes the government can't do it alone. They need support, and private sectors can be a really strong partner in this area, especially around financing.
Exactly.
And so Desiree, I'll turn to you for the same question of lessons learned and recommendations that you would provide, and perhaps what type of resources have you identified that are needed to replicate the models? I think Mauritania, we know, has a really strong engagement with the national government. So perhaps you can share, yes, actually, I'll just turn to you. You share us with lessons learned.
Oh, thank you so much. Maybe before coming to lesson, I just want to reinforce something. Our school feeding in Mauritania illustrates how school can mobilize community and foster social cohesion. By providing regular meal, we create a common space where students and their families meet, engage, and collaborate, regardless their socio-economic background. That's clear. Second thing I want to reinforce is the fact that the school feeding reinforce the example of solidarity. Just an example that, and also the fact that in Mauritania, the government decided to institute uniform in all the schools is also a great example of reinforcing the solidarity, the equity, and mitigating the injustice. Another important thing that I just want to put in front is the fact that we construct cafeteria where the kids enjoy their meal. That place is used by the PTA for a regular meeting, but also at the community level, people sit together there for their meeting. So it is a good place to reinforce socialization at the community level. The last thing I really want to reinforce now to come back to your question is the fact that the community engagement is very important when it comes to school feeding, because we engage community by including them in the design, in the management of the school feeding program. We hold regular meeting with the community leader, parents, local organization to get their feedback and address their concern. This participation approach ensures that the program is responsive to local needs. The second important thing I want to reinforce is the capacity building. I think it's extremely important to work with the community to make sure that we improve their capacity to be able to manage their school feeding. That's really, really important thing. When we have to talk to people who are talking about sustainability, it is really important to empower the community, the PTA, improve their skills, give them the knowledge they need to really implement the program. Now, I just want to end with maybe one recommendation. The recommendation I want to make is that I am here, this is a good platform to call important donors like USAID, like USDA, and even host government, and also the private sector, to note that school feeding is a powerful tool to mitigate injustice. It's a powerful tool to foster social cohesion, especially among children, parents, and their community leaders. So we need to invest more on school feeding because, as I mentioned in the introduction, the children are the leader of tomorrow. So if we invest in their education, we create more space for a powerful world in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Desiree. And your point, I think the lesson learned around capacity strengthening, we've really found great success in a coaching mentorship model that we take with an accompaniment model that we take with our counterparts, whether it's our local partners we work with or the government entities we work with, usually the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Agriculture. And working with them at the level of national, regional, and local. And as you mentioned in your first presentation, really emphasizing designing the program together, implementing together, and monitoring together, and digesting the results, and with pause and reflect workshops, and ensuring that we are always forward thinking and looking about how do we support them and set them up for success, because we know as a donor funded program, we as an implementer, third party implementer, will not be there forever, and we don't want to be. We want to ensure that these programs are owned by the local community. And so thank you so much for those thoughts. I see we have a hand raised from Andrew. If you have, I hope you can unmute and it works for you, but if you have any challenges, feel free to type. But thank you. Go ahead, Andrew.
Hi. Yeah, I've written the question also into the chat. So I'm wondering, if the school feeding project manages to seed into further developments, like, for example, once the feeding project runs, if that, for example, creates a space for a creative work together, like children singing together, dancing together, children playing theater together. And then further, if, in a more special way, for example, there are projects that as soon as the community consolidates, and for example, I've heard that some conflicts then can be, let's say, smoothed down. So as the conflict vanishes, is it so that if there was trauma, the trauma can be worked on, So is there a further development? And then the next question tied to it is, how is the construction of common identities created through these projects? Because we know that generations are branded, like we have a X generation, we have an Alpha generation, okay? And the question is, what makes it possible to create a common identity for these children and the communities in which these children are embedded?
Thank you, Andrew. Those are very interesting questions. I'm wondering, Catherine, I see you're off mute, so is that an indication you want to answer first?
Sure. I think like I've worked on projects in the past that focused on conflict mitigation, conflict resolution, and a lot of the things that comes out of that, including working with children who are dealing with the trauma of conflict. I think a school feeding project leads to other there's unintended positive consequences when the school canteen, when they put together an economic income generating activity, for example, so that they can then generate an income. And so in some cases it leads to stuff like that, or it leads to when you get when you get more interest, like we work in preschools, when you get more interest in preschools, then that leads to the appropriate ministries responding to a demand for building more preschools. So it leads to secondary effects. It leads to secondary consequences when the community comes together and has a common goal. Like they've created some social capital. Now they can then use that to work on another goal. So that's the first one. The second one's a big question. I don't know. Here in Senegal, people very much identify with the people that they graduate from college with. Like, you can literally go up to a stranger, and if you both graduated from the same.
Oh, Catherine, you hit mute. We can't hear you.
Sorry. For the second question, I think that's a bigger, more complicated question, because here in Senegal, for example, people that graduate from college, the same college at the same year, they're instant buddies, no matter if they've never met each other before. If they find out that they're from the same college in the same year, if they went to UCAD and they graduated in the same year, that's it. They'll help each other out. They create an identity because of that experience. But that's at the college level. I think in rural elementary schools, which is where we work, really, I think the seeds that get planted where Christians and Muslims are interacting, where Pul and Wolof and Sose are interacting, I think those kinds of little weaving together, that's where that helps them to be to look beyond their usual identity group. I'm not sure it creates a new one or a generational one, but it does help see others. Let's put it that way.
Thank you, Catherine. And I would just add, Andrew, through these programs, we don't do specific psychosocial support interventions. And these programs are not present in immediate conflict zones or whatnot. They are in more stable communities. But with that, you cited some theater groups and singing. We do, through our programs, we have girls groups, so a safe space for young girl students to have a mentor who's a volunteer, either a teacher or a volunteer from the community, and an opportunity for them to speak about relevant topics. We have reading groups, we have summer camps. So additional extracurricular activities where the children can interact, and it promotes learning outside of the classroom, not just traditional in-classroom learning. And with that, there's theater, there's reading competitions. We have our community health fairs where we bring together, it's an opportunity for us to do cooking demonstrations with pregnant and lactating women. We bring in the Ministry of Health. We use it as an opportunity for administering deworming meds, vitamin distribution, and for the kids to show off what they're learning in school about water, health, and sanitation. So at some point it was mentioned that these programs, these types of programs are really, they're entry points for many different sectors. And I think there's a lot of potential for them for different organizations or ministries to see schools more as a, kind of a breeding ground for there's an opportunity there. And it's a way to access not just kids, but, kids take home what they learn and they're sharing with their parents what they did in school. Yeah, I just wanted to add that in a little bit, and that's something that's across our programs. But I don't know if Casimiro or Desiree have anything else to add. I do recognize that we are getting close on time. But Desiree, I think you went off mute, so I'll let you jump in.
Yeah, thank you so much. I just want to mention that the question is really, really important. But for our case, I think school feeding really helps the kids, especially when it comes to the vulnerable children. Because, when we come from a real village, you cannot afford one village, one day a meal. And because of the school feeding, you can get a breakfast, you can get a lunch. I am sure, I think it can really help to improve or to even increase your development. So that's a thing that I want to mention. Also in our program, we are combining the school feeding with some deworming vitamin element that also foster, not only it's not about the food, so it also helps, to ensure that your global development. I am talking to you. I am from Burkina, in a real village, while sometimes even to get one day a meal is extremely difficult. Because of the school feeding, I can say I am an impact of the school feeding because I get the school feeding. I have been to school for 6 years and then go to college, continues to get the school feeding at the secondary school. It really helped to ensure the development of the school feeding. Even here in this country, any civil servant from our generation, you ask him what is the impact of the school feeding, I'm sure it really helped to improve many diseases, including the trauma that you mentioned. It's something that I just want to add to what you and Catherine mentioned. Thank you so much.
Great. Well, I recognize we're at time. I just wanted to end by noting that this was a really rich conversation. I, for one, took many notes and walked away with a great understanding of how these schools can be unusual mobilizers, powerful entry points. I love how they are bringing, disparate communities together and finding ways to humanize the other and resolve localized conflicts, and with the potential for that long-term intergenerational impact. I think the point that we had earlier about government resources needed for us to really standardize and expand on these school canteen programs is really important, as well as to be able to build their capacity, right, to be able to manage and do this work in the long run. And really selling that story of why school feeding and peace building is so important is what we need to really get those resources. So again, I appreciate the opportunity for us to tell those stories today, to really hear about that impact. So please join me again for thanking Theresa and our speakers and our AFP volunteers, and for everybody who participated today for your attention and your questions.